Hey everyone, thanks for joining. Today I'm speaking with John Kay. John is a contributor at the National Post, and he also is an editor at Quillette, and he hosts a Quillette podcast. Hey John, thank you for coming on.
Thanks for having me, and I'm sorry the lighting is a little weird. There's like this big splotch of super bright light immediately behind me.
Oh, don't worry about it. I only release audio anyways because I'm far too lazy to edit video.
Okay,
So
well, you have to look at it.
yeah, yeah, it's not going to blind me.
Okay.
um, yeah, so like I've been following you for a bit, and you do a lot of stuff about politics in Canada, and I figured we could just start by talking about the election. Now, I'm actually a little surprised at how well the conservatives are doing, and that the liberals are slipping. Like I didn't think that was going to be happening. Uh,
Yeah. I there are so many people in Canada who are paid to be political analysts or to write about politics, or people who aren't paid but just obsessively tweet about it, and we never seem to get it right. I mean, sometimes pollsters get it right, but that's usually, when we say pollsters get it right, it means like before the election, like immediately before the election, they'll try and predict the election result. And then the election comes and sometimes they match that up right. But in terms of like, say, 6 months out, 3 months out, even 2 months out, figuring out which party is going to get momentum, um, everyone's wrong. Like, Trump is a great example. I never predicted the Trump phenomenon. When he was designated as the Republican candidate, I thought like he'd lose all 50 states, and then he became president. I famously, among my colleagues, I met Stephen Harper when he was still head of, God, what was he head of before he became conservative leader? It's like some conservative advocacy group. And I said, oh man, this guy's so grumpy and he's so antisocial, and he'll never make it in politics. And then he became like a 3-term prime minister. So it's almost like sort of a random number generator. It is kind of weird and disappointing how unprepared the Liberals were, despite the fact they called the election. I mean, that part was weird. They kind of just thought that the same stuff would work. Like they just, abortion, schmabortion, healthcare, like sort of the same slogans, but like in a somewhat mechanical way. But it just didn't work. Like it was something very lazy and witless about the liberal attacks on the conservatives. On the other hand, in the past, lazy, witless attacks against the conservatives have often worked. So I can't say for certain why they're not working this time.
yeah, okay, the lazy, witless attacks. Now, I've stopped kind of referring to myself as liberal, conservative, left, right. I mean, the terms just have lost so much meaning now. But one thing I've noticed is it's so easy now just to say, oh, well, that's just a right wing talking point, especially in Canada. I mean, I see it a lot coming from Trudeau. I see it a lot coming from, liberals in the NDP. If they want to say something or if they want to disparage, anyone, be the conservatives or like the Bloc, or I don't care, but they'll say, oh, that's Trump politics, or that's American politics, or that's just, right wing talking points.
Yeah, and that label has changed though. Like, maybe 20 years ago, you'd say U.S. style. So like, you wouldn't say private healthcare when you were attacking your opponent. You say that's U.S. style healthcare, and you're going to open the door to U.S. style campaign finance, and U.S. style military unilateralism. And then that sort of ended when it was Obama who was president, because it was like progressives loved Obama. I liked Obama. I thought Obama was a good president. And then Trump made everyone, including in Canada, go crazy. And if I had to pick actually one reason why Trudeau has sort of lost his magic, is a lot of his magic was being the anti-Trump. And Trump was, I mean, I don't know where you stand on Trump. I found Trump legitimately obnoxious, and I didn't like him. And I was happy to see him voted out. But his presence in office helped liberals, because then it was, he was the baseline. And you read the Toronto Star, and Doug Ford was like Donald Trump, and Aaron O'Toole was like Donald Trump, and Andrew Scheer was like Donald Trump. Jason Kenney, of course, was like Donald Trump. But now Trump's gone, so like it's become difficult. Um, as a foil, he was amazing for progressive Canadian politicians, and he's gone now. So I think that is hurting Trudeau because he doesn't have that.
I don't know. Okay, the whole Trump thing. I mean, frankly, the last two elections in the States, I said the same thing as I said in the last Canadian election. I was like, if I was in the States, I'd vote down ticket. In the last Canadian election, I spoiled my ballot. I mean, I literally wrote on my ballot, like, give me someone worthwhile voting for. Because there's no one worth voting for as far as I was concerned. But yeah, I mean, Trump, my whole thing with him was he was unstable. I don't think he knew from second to second what he was going to do.
Right.
And like, that was my biggest thing with him. I mean, all the other stuff, his abrasiveness, his tweeting, whatever, it's the instability that I was like, there's no way I could have voted for that guy.
Yeah. And especially when this is a guy who's supposed to be in control of the nuclear codes. That's and you do not get the sense that Aaron O'Toole has that aspect of a personality, right? Like Aaron O'Toole is, I mean, some conservatives have complained that he's not populist enough or angry enough or Trump-like enough, because I don't think that's his personality. I don't think he is those things. So the larger issue is I find a lot of people they don't vote their angels, they vote their villains. So I just got a long message from a family member about how he was going to vote for the Liberals because that was the best way to defeat the Conservatives. And I get messages from other people who are more conservative who say, well, we have to vote Conservative because that's the best way to beat Trudeau, because like they see Trudeau as a villain figure. They have like Trudeau derangement syndrome. And then, my left-wing friends have conservative derangement syndrome. Like there's an unsettling number of people who are mostly focused on just keeping the guy they regard as sort of like the demon out of office. And sometimes they only have a very vague understanding of the platform of the party they're voting for. They're just voting for that party because they see it as the best way to keep the bad guy out of office, as they see it.
Now, look, the American politics thing, like, is this, because I mean, it's slowly, I've seen it slowly happen in Canada. I started voting in the late 80s, and I've slowly seen it start happening where it was more emphasis on the leader than it was on your local MP.
Right.
And I mean, should Canadians go back to that? Like, focus on your local MP and hold them to account and vote for the person that you think will best represent you?
So everyone says that. And it's a nice thing to think and say, because technically speaking, in our parliamentary system, you're not voting for a prime ministerial candidate, you're voting for an MP. And then, that MP's party affiliation arithmetically across the country, that dictates who becomes prime minister, because it's the leader of the party who gets the most seats. And I think that made more sense like 30 or 40 years ago, when individual MPs maybe had a little bit more power. But now, and it certainly makes more sense in the United States, where you often have Republicans and Democrats breaking party lines. But in Canada, party discipline at the parliamentary level is just like so staunch that no matter who you're voting for at the local riding level, except in extraordinary circumstances, that person's party affiliation pretty much is going to dictate how they're going to vote on pretty much every issue, because almost every vote is completely whipped. You get you either get votes of confidence where you have to vote with your party or they're going to get voted out of office, or you get votes that aren't necessarily confidence votes, and theoretically you're able to vote your conscience. But realistically, if you don't vote the way your party leader wants you to vote, you're not going to get committee assignments, and you're going to be relegated to the backbench, and you're not going to be seen as a team player, and you're not going to get party supported election time and all that stuff. So we have such a whipped system that you could have, in Montreal, where I grew up, in TMR, Irwin Kotler, this blue chip McGill intellectual, world-renowned leader in genocide studies and the study of anti-Semitism and stuff like that. And actually, he was Minister of Justice for a period. And people would vote for him. It would happen to be a very red riding, but people would vote for him in part because like he's a superstar as a candidate. And in that case, like he became a cabinet minister. But these days, I don't think it matters if a guy's a superstar and he, with rare exceptions where he gets a prominent cabinet post, it doesn't matter if you're voting for a superstar or you're voting for like a doorstop. 99% of the time, that person is going to vote their party. So I actually don't see the point in voting on the basis of the quality of individual MP.
Yeah, that guy. Okay, that kind of sucks. I mean, like it's like right now, my takeaway is like I think the best possible outcome in this election would be a minority conservative government. I don't want any one of those parties to have a majority right now. But okay, the whole liberal thing, like to get them out, whatever. I don't want C10 and I don't want C36.
All right, they're basically the twin censorship bills.
Yeah,
basically.
yeah. Like I want those gone. And the NDP, the Liberals, as far as I can tell, the Greens, and I guess the Bloc was supporting them as well. Like they are all behind. They were all going to go vote for that. So I mean, like that's my. If it comes down to it, free speech is about my only, like, fundamentalist issue. Like that's the only thing I'll be fundamentalist about. And
and those are the issues that I remember when I was deciding who to vote for. Those are basically the issues that when I saw them coming down the pipe, it pushed me in the direction of the Conservatives for two reasons. One, the actual substance of this legislation, because like you, I prioritize free speech. So that was one thing, is that I don't want these things becoming law. Putting aside the issue of whether liberals are actually serious about turning these things into law or they're just using them as wedge issues. But the second issue was you can tell a lot about a party by the sort of flurry of legislation it introduces in the months before an election, when things are getting desperate and it's trying to rally its troops and it's being maybe disingenuous. Like to me, that's when maybe a party shows its true colors. And by the way, you saw this on the conservative side of the spectrum. Like in Harper's last term, he started introducing some pretty creepy stuff, barbaric practices, hotlines, and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Which he wouldn't have done that in his previous terms. But again, sometimes parties show their darker and unflattering side late in their tenure when they're getting desperate. And so even if C10 and C36, I think that's what the numbers are, even if they don't become law, I just found it very unsettling and politically unattractive that that's the kind of stuff they were introducing as wedge issues.
Yeah, but I mean, look, with those two, it was in their platform. The NDP and the Liberals had it specifically in their platform that they wanted to combat online hate speech in the last election. So
yeah, fair enough.
And when they put in those laws, I'm like, well, they told you they were going to do it and they're doing it. So that's, I couldn't vote for them for that reason. But I mean, I have my issues with the Conservatives, but that's my whole point. Like if I have issues with the Conservatives or if I have issues with any party, I'm going to vote for the party that is not going to stifle my speech. And so at least if whatever issues I have with the Conservatives, I can at least speak about it and be as abrasive as I want.
Yeah. And I think, and C10, if I'm getting it right, bringing back Section 13 of the Canadian Human Rights Act, which I think that was C10, where private litigants can come forward and take people to task for speech they deem offensive and then collect a bounty on that basis, which again, that was the law of the land under the old Section 13. They got rid of it because, well, there was actually one guy in particular who was was his hobby. He would just go after people and try and collect money under that provision. That to me is really worrying. And they got rid of that for a reason. And the fact the Liberals want to bring it back, it doesn't speak well to their approach to free speech.
Yeah, but actually, I think it's C36. C10 was the one about the Canadian content online and all that. Like they were going to prioritize.
Right, and they had a lot of other stuff in there.
Yeah. But like I said, free speech is my hobby horse. So I'm looking at these people and I'm looking at everything Trudeau's done since he's got in. I mean, he's like M103. I know that was only a motion.
Oh, that was the Islamophobia thing.
Yeah. And everything he's done, it's one way or another to like control speech, and I just like
Well, it's like
I
a
want them
fetish.
out.
It's like a fetish.
Yeah, no, but okay, sorry, I got to harp on this, but he said it. I don't know how he said it at least twice publicly now, where he misquoted Oliver Wendell Holmes and said, "Oh well, you can't yell fire in a crowded theater." And I mean, that's not what Holmes said. Holmes says you cannot falsely yell fire in a crowded theater. So
Right.
the falsely is important.
Yeah.
And then, like, if you know anything about that, if you actually look into it, a year later, he kind of recanted it. He said, "I wish I hadn't said that." He, like, like all that stuff was taken out of
Out of
American
context.
legal. Like when it comes down to free speech, like all that was. If you're going to quote the guy, at least look at what he did. Like he said, "No, that was wrong. I shouldn't have done it." And so,
Well, the thing bothered me about M103 is that it was specific. Well, Islamophobia, I think there are some Islamophobes, and it can be a real thing. Although not every criticism of Islam is Islamophobia, obviously. But the conservatives played that game too, because I don't know if you remember, but at one point they were trying to make suicide bombings like a special crime under the criminal code. And it was plainly directed toward, I mean, at the time, suicide bombings were very closely associated with like Al Qaeda and Hamas and stuff like that. And obviously, no one supports suicide bombing. It's a horrifying form of murdering people. But like, we already have crimes against terrorism and murder. Like, you didn't need a new law against suicide attacks. It was the only reason you would want to do that is the same reason that the liberals put in M103s. You're trying to curry favor with one particular group, right? So, I don't like laws that play favorites with ethnopolitics, like even in a purportedly supportive or positive way. It's just it's anti-liberal to use your legislative power to be like ethnically or religiously specific in the way you protect your citizens. So that's what bothered me about M103.
yeah, I mean, okay, like first of all, Islamophobia, I think the whole term is wrong. I mean, if you want to talk about anti-Muslim bigotry, that's fine, but I mean, phobic of an ideology, like that's like the whole concept of it just bugs me. Like
well, the way it's used too broadly. Yeah, or maybe anti-Muslim bigotry. I mean, there's people who are bigoted against all sorts of people. There's anti-Semitism against Jews and Islamophobia. If you don't like the term, that's fine. But it is a real thing. Like just the Muslims in Canada, and especially after 9/11, going to the airport if you were Muslim could be, from what I understand, like a really huge ordeal. I had a friend, she's from India. Well, her family's from India, and she couldn't fly because her name was so similar, oddly, to the name of a male terrorist. And so she had to get to the airport like 3 hours. It wasn't, I wouldn't say it was Islamophobia per se. Like it was a computer glitch. But I mean, to her, Islamophobia felt pretty real.
Okay, but that's okay. Like I'm not saying that's why I said anti-Muslim bigotry. I don't. The term Islamophobia muddies it up and it creates too much thing. But okay, I'll give you talking about travel and stuff like that. So, I spent close to 13 years working overseas. So I was working in war zones, and I worked in Haiti after the earthquake. So I had a passport with visa stamps from Kosovo, Afghanistan, Bosnia. Okay, right. Okay. At one point, my passport was issued in Islamabad because it was expiring while I was in Kabul. Yeah. So that couldn't even be scanned electronically. I had all these things in it. I've got an Arab name. Okay, so I mean, like.
It says you had an Arab name and you had been to Kosovo, Afghanistan, Pakistan. Wow, that's like
okay. That was for work. I mean, like then there was all the places I visited. So it was like all over Southeast Asia, Turkey. I mean, like I could go on, but yeah. So it was. If I'm stopped, I get it. I understand. Like they look at my passport and it's like there's all kinds of bells and whistles, but whatever. Like I said, I was working with military and stuff, so I had ID and I was like, here, this is what I was doing, and that was okay. But
right, okay.
I mean, going through the States though, there was times where I was like questioned for about 45 minutes, just all my ID and everything, and it was just the same questions over and over again. So, but as far as okay, look, don't get me wrong, like there's a lot of attacks on Muslims. I'm not gonna discount it, but anti-Semitism is still the number one issue when you look at hate crime statistics. and then I believe it was against black Canadians, and then it was, Islam was like 3 or 4, and I'm not going to say like, it's in the top 5. It's still not good, but it would seem like it was always that to the exclusion of everything else.
Yeah, and so I've learned to be very cynical about this kind of stuff because, as you may know, I'm not religiously observant, but I'm of Jewish heritage, and when I was at the National Post, every year B'nai B'rith, which is Jewish advocacy group, would come out with this report on anti-Semitism, right? And somehow every year anti-Semitism was going up, even though as a journalist and just as a citizen, by my observation, like during my lifetime, anti-Semitism has gone down. Like even when I started the National Post in the late 90s, I routinely got anti-Semitic email whenever I would write about the Middle East, something like that. And that kind of just stopped over the course of 10 or 15 years and during my tenure at the Post. And so when I had the Jewish advocacy organization just claiming that anti-Semitism is this huge pandemic problem, like Jews are under siege, and I mean, yeah, anti-Semitism does happen, but it was completely at variance with my experience in Canada. And I think one of the reasons that you get a lot of reporting of anti-Semitic alleged hate crimes and acts of hate or abuse or something is the Jewish community, to its credit, has created a very effective system of advocacy. There's a lot of advocacy organizations. There's a lot of community hubs in places like Toronto and Montreal and Ottawa and Vancouver. And so when anything happens like there's graffiti or anything like that, they have this organizational machine that kicks into gear to make sure that it is reported to the correct authorities. And I think there's certainly other communities in Canada that have learned from this and have maybe modeled some of their advocacy on that. And it's not a bad thing, but it means that it has a statistically overrepresentative effect compared to other groups of maybe newer arrived Canadians who don't have that organizational structure. Think of like Filipino Canadians or Tamils, who like just their community activism, their community groups just haven't reached the same level of sophistication. And so it doesn't surprise me that statistically certain groups are overrepresented compared to others because, they have the people and activists and institutions within their community that are like very much primed to report any allegation along those lines. Like B'nai B'rith, that's just kind of its bread and butter. It's, there's a story someone told me there was like 30 anti-Semitic stickers that were placed in a public bathroom at a school in Ottawa, and B'nai B'rith recorded it as 30 hate crimes. So
Okay.
so you get stuff like that.
Yeah.
So,
okay. I was going by the Stats Canada, like the police.
Well, you're right.
Yeah.
According to the statistics, you're absolutely right. Those statistics only report what people report. And so it's only as accurate as the incoming. They don't know what they don't know. So like, for instance, in the Tamil community, if there's stuff happening, I know some Tamils, I know some Filipinos here in Toronto. It's like, they're just more inclined to shrug it off because most of them, they've arrived more recently. There's just less of this institutional support structure to like, oh, this happened to you. You saw it. Okay, report that. Like they're at a different stage of organization.
Well, I mean, I also wonder if it's something like, okay, my family immigrated from India, and still to this day, and it's not that my mother's ever had any experience with the police, but like and this is coming from like the police in India, the police in Pakistan, where she grew up.
Yeah,
and those people are violent, and they'll hit you, like they'll smack someone with their cane at a drop of a hat, and they'll get violent. So she fears the police. So I'm wondering if it's something of that as well. Like it's just kind of a fear of the authority, and I'm not putting this on systemic racism or anything like that. I'm just saying like it's where they come from, the police and the authority are a lot rougher than they are here.
Yeah, and it works both ways because I have some friends who are recently arrived immigrants, and talking to their family members, it's interesting because if they find out that you're, say, a lawyer or a journalist or like a local politician or something, they'll it's kind of funny. They'll come to you like with just these legal issues, like, oh, I need this document, or I'm trying to get this guy into the country, or um, I'm in trouble for not making car payments. Do you think you could clear this up for me? Like, they kind of just assume that if you're a privileged person, like, you can just make a phone call and make problems go away.
Yeah.
Because I get the sense, I mean, there are countries in the world where that happens, right? Like, if you are a privileged person, you can kind of just make a phone call to a cousin who works at the Justice Ministry, or and Canada isn't that kind of country. Like, so it's interesting.
Yes and no. Well, I can speak about India, or I can speak about the city where my family is. That used to be a lot more, but with the rise of the middle class in India, like, it's getting less.
Right.
So there's less fixing that you can do, or there's a power shift going on. I don't know, but like it's not as much, but you can still bribe your way out of a lot of things.
But you're right that once you have an empowered middle class, especially with access to technology and social media, they don't put up with that. Whereas if you have like an old-fashioned agrarian, like Russia in the 19th century, sort of peasant society, where you have a small group of people with power and 99% of people who don't, it's much easier to have like a place where the 19th century equivalent of a phone call can go a long way, right?
But I mean, okay, India still has, like, I say it's a more honest form of corruption. Like, my brother needed to get, like, they were doing some work on the water and the water main in front of his house, and it was the city doing this, but he had to bribe like 3 different departments to make sure that he kept having water at his house. And so, like, that's factored into everything. There's, like, everyone knows you're gonna have to bribe someone at some point or other, and like low-level functionaries. And it's, like I said, it's factored in as like the cost of doing business, and it's done. So, like I said, it's corruption, but it's like upfront and honest about it.
Yeah, sometimes when I read newspaper accounts and you hear about like people storming a courthouse or something like that, sometimes in the story it's like the guy bribed a judge, but the judge still didn't rule in his favor, and the guy got really angry. So, yeah, I mean, look, this is how these things worked in most parts of the world until relatively recently in our history, in human history. So it's not surprising that things work that way. Canada is shockingly uncorrupt. It's one of the things I like about it. Like, if a police officer pulls you over for a speeding ticket in Canada and you try and like give them $100 bill to get out of it, which was not an uncommon thing to do, like in parts of the United States as recently as like the 60s and the 70s. And, I used to, and when I was a kid, I would still hear about occasionally stories of people doing stuff. Like, if you tried that with a Canadian police officer, he'd laugh at you, or he'd arrest you, or one of those two. But it's again, it's one of the endearing things about Canada.
Yeah. Well, I guess, I mean, we started talking about politics, but people might just see like all the corruption, like, they could throw the WE scandal in your face and say, well, what about that?
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. It's sort of corruption in plain sight. Like the WE scandal, there was always like the people, my friends and family know this, but I always thought that WE thing was creepy. There was always just something weird and cultish about it. And it kind of made sense that the Liberals were partnered with them in some way, because the Liberals brand, like McKenna and Trudeau, like the sort of young rah-rah thing, like it made kind of sense. But again, that happened in plain sight, most of it. Like this, that was, a lot of the most shocking kinds of waste, including cultural subsidies in Canada, are completely above board. They're not crimes because they're out in the open. They're listed as budget items. So, that arguably does a lot more harm than the stuff that's actually criminal.
Okay, look, I don't want to keep you too much longer, but I'm going to circle back to, like, like I had mentioned, American politics. Now, I find it funny that Trudeau throws that around, yet he's basically got in all but name a ministry of critical race theory. The Ministry of Diversity, Inclusion, and Youth. I mean, that's American jurisprudence. I mean, it came out of like legal scholarship from Harvard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The thing about Trudeau is, I mean, that ministry is basically like, might as well be called the ministry of whatever is hot on Twitter right now. And as soon as that stuff goes out of fashion, which in some ways it already is, that'll be it. Like, it'll be dumps. Trudeau is a very modern prime minister in some ways, in that he's the first prime minister Canada's ever had who is a true creature of social media, who realizes that attention spans have gotten down. Political culture has regressed to like a very youthful kind of state. Video is very big in people's lives. You see Jagmeet Singh doing a lot of TikTok stuff. And we're seeing it now. Like, the Liberals just introduced this very substantive policy platform thing, but people aren't paying that much attention to it. Instead, they're talking about some Liberal MP who's been accused of sexual harassment, and that's dominating the news because that's kind of like a hashtag Me Too thing. So for the Liberals, it's kind of a live by the sword, die by the sword thing, right? Because Me Too and all those social justice movements were a big part of their brand, and now the shoe's on the other foot, and they're like, look away, avert your eyes. Let's talk about this 800-page policy we have. It's one of the reasons Trudeau isn't doing well, is because on so many issues you can read his own words back to him. He planted, how many trees did he promise to plant? Like, 800 zillion trees or whatever. And like the true number was like 7 or something. Me Too stuff. There's, the anti-racism stuff. There's the blackface. That was the last election cycle. It's part of the problem, by the way, of being an incumbent, is all of the aspirational, idealistic stuff that you got elected on now can be read back to you, and it's completely tarnished because you've been in power. And SNC Lavalin, and that stuff takes its toll. It's hard to play sort of the squeaky clean boy wonder when you've played the grubby business of Canadian politics for two terms, right?
Yeah. The throwing stuff back in his face. I was joking around yesterday. Like, he made those comments in Sudbury about, people who are anti-vaxxers and
those people.
And then he was talking about, okay, the government. I mean, I think he was hinting at the government should be able to take their kids away. And I was like, well, if you look at the demographics, I mean, large percentage of the Black population, large percentage of the First Nations population are vaccine hesitant. I'm like, so you're talking about government taking away children, like right after the residents, like the the resident school scandal.
But presumably he meant, no, I didn't mean those people. I meant like bad conservative white people.
But I mean, like, no, but he was hinting at that. I'm like, well, he's being a little racist now, isn't he?
So you know what? It's I actually didn't think about that at the time, but it's true. I mean, and if you talk, like, there's a prominent Black activist here in Toronto. Her last name is Maynard or Mayno or something like that. She just wrote a whole book. I think that was her. Yeah, or she's writing a whole book about the racistness of of child services, because they, a lot of the kids they take away for all sorts of reasons, socioeconomic reasons, end up being Black or Indigenous. Like, so, but I didn't put 2 and 2 together. I think in Trudeau's formulation, it's like, if you're an anti-vaxxer, it means you're like a white guy who looks like a Trump supporter. But you're right. There's all kinds of people who are vaccine hesitant. In fact, there was a poll that was done like a month ago, and they found that the average vaccine hesitant person in Canada was a 43-year-old female Liberal voter. Did you see that? It was published in, I think, in Maclean's. Let me see if I can find it. Even as we're speaking, let me see if I can find it. And it was really interesting. They asked them all sorts of questions. Like, it basically came down to distrust, and it kind of made sense that it would be like, yeah, here we go. Oh, I said 43, it's 42. Yeah, so the headline is a Maclean's article, August 11th. Typical vaccine hesitant person is a 42-year-old Ontario woman who votes Liberal, according to Abacus polling. And it's not that crazy when you think that not even until recently, even now, the sort of people who talk about health food and natural organic stuff and who are suspicious of big pharma, like Pfizer is, among other things, a huge pharmaceutical company. And until 15 minutes ago, the people who were most suspicious of big pharma weren't conservatives. It was progressives, people who buying $8 bottles of organic milk at Whole Foods and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And so, not, yahoos like me eating a Burger King. So it wasn't super surprising to find out that there's a lot of progressives who are vaccine hesitant. The difference is those vaccine hesitant progressives tend to be like more sort of, as I said, sort of upper middle class Whole Foods types. They're not the kind of people who are going to go out and like scream at Trudeau at a campaign stop, because like that's not part of their brand. So the people you're seeing who are protesting Trudeau are kind of like maybe the more working class, non-Whole Foods, maybe more conservative, populist branch of the vaccine hesitant movement.
Okay. Well, like I said, I don't want to keep you too much longer. If you want to let people know where they can get a hold of you, and
yeah, so I tweet at John Kay, JONKAY, and I write articles for Quillette. I tell people it's like Gillette, but with QU instead of G. And about once or twice a month, I write articles for the National Post. I wrote one yesterday about David Fissman, which we didn't even get to talk about. This is the famous Ontario doctor who decided that Aaron O'Toole is sending secret coded messages to white power terrorists because the conservative campaign slogan is 14 words. And
I saw that. Oh my God.
Yeah. And any sentence that's 14 words means you're a fan of Hitler. Like it was, and I'm not actually exaggerating how crazy this stuff was. Anyway, so I wrote a little bit about that in that column. And then my podcast is just Google Quillette Podcast, and it's on Spotify and iTunes and wherever you listen to podcasts, including wherever you're listening to this podcast.
Well, great. Thank you very much. It was good talking to you, John.
Yeah, that was good. And so now you're not just a face and a handsome picture on Twitter.
Well, I don't know if I've ever a handsome picture, but thanks.
Both of us. Both of us. Okay, talk soon.
Thanks. And thanks everyone for listening.